Hello and welcome to this video on income tax and national insurance. It's a part of my Core Maths collection, which you can find at coremaths.co.uk. I'm going to cover a lot of things in this video, including what is income tax and what is national insurance, along with some examples. I've split the video up, so once you've watched the whole thing through, you'll be able to just jump to the parts that you need when you come to revise. But let's start with what is income tax? So most people that work in the UK will pay income tax. It's collected by His Majesty's Revenue and Custom for the government, and it's used to pay for things like public services, so the NHS and schools, as well as like roads and housing, for example. And usually tax is collected on a PAYE system. So that's pay as you earn. So if you're employed and you get paid by your employer, then it's going to be taken out of your pay before it even gets to you. You pay it as you earn the money. This means that people don't have to calculate it themselves. Now, there are other types of income tax, other types of tax like VAT and corporation tax, for example. And if you are self-employed or you do contractual work, then you might not do it as PAYE and you may just pay like yearly or figure it out some other way. But tax can be very complicated. So in core maths, we're just going to deal with fairly straightforward cases. This is not an accountancy course after all. So I guess a question is, do you think that everybody has to pay income tax? This leads us into personal allowance. Now, you probably won't have to pay income tax on everything that you earn. In the UK, people that earn up to £100,000 per year have a tax-free allowance of £12,570. So that's £12,570 that you don't have to pay any tax on at all for the majority of people. And this tax-free amount gets called the personal allowance. When you get a job and it gives you a pay slip, you'll see a tax code on it. So £12,570 would be shown by the tax code 1257L. And if for some reason your personal allowance is different, then that code will tell you what your personal allowance is. So the personal allowance does change year by year and depends on the person as well. But for the majority of people, and again, remembering that we're trying to keep things fairly simple in core maths, once you've gone past the personal allowance of that 12,570, which is going to be the case for most people, the remainder after that's called your taxable income. So what percentage of your taxable income do you actually have to pay in tax? Yeah, I'm going to introduce you to this concept of tax brackets. So this does change from year to year, but for the 2024 exams, I'm expecting it to be this table here, which you will get in the preliminary material. You don't have to remember this. You can see this as the basic rate is 20%, and that's for taxable incomes up to 37,700, and then past that up to 150,000, although that's a little complex, but past 37,700 taxable income, it's 40% of that. There is a point here that's talking about the taxable income. You take the personal allowance off first and then start thinking about this. Obviously, I'm going to show you all of that, but there's also an additional rate of 45% above these ones as well, but we're not going to worry about those. Once you get past £100,000 a year, then the rules about personal allowances change. And whilst it is in the scope of the core maths course, it could ask you that. They'll definitely have to spell it out, and it would be in the preliminary material, which would be a hint that you might get asked about it. Most of the time, we're not going to be worrying about that at all. So if we look at the percentages, let's break down how much you're actually going to have to pay. Time for some simple examples. Cleo earns a gross salary of £11,200 per year. How much income tax do they pay? Nothing. Because the £11,200 isn't beyond that 12,570 personal allowance, they just don't pay any income tax at all. Okay, I did say it's going to be a simple example. Maybe that was a little bit too simple for you. How about this one? Rudo earns a gross salary of £26,410 per year. How much income tax do they pay? Okay, well, we need to bear in mind that personal allowance, and we'll have reference to that table. Again, you don't need to memorize the table. Realistically, if you do it enough times, you probably will remember it, but it'll be there for reference for you in the preliminary material. I'm going to use this green rectangle to represent the £26,410. And we need to think of a way of representing this. You might have your own method, but I'm going to show you one here that I quite like. I've got my income tax tubs. This tub is my personal allowance tub, and it can hold £12,570. And money in this one, we don't need to pay any income tax on. Obviously, 26,410 is higher than that, so I can put 12,570 into there and think about how much is left over. So 26,410, take off the personal allowance, means I've got 13,840 left. Now that is called the taxable income, but I'm going to think about it as, well, let's think about my next income tax tub. This one's a bit bigger. It can hold £37,700, and anything on here, I need to pay the basic rate of 20%. So the 13,840 that was left over fits comfortably into this tub without filling it up. It's a fairly simple calculation now. 20% of 13,840. And you might notice in what I've written there, I've put 0.20. Now I know that 0 is not really necessary. 0.2 is 20%, but I just find it helps people avoid confusion. 20%, 0.20. Put the 0 in if you like, don't put it in, doesn't matter. But my experience suggests that you're less likely to mess it up if you do that. And turns out that for this case, Rudo is going to be paying £2,768 in income tax. Onwards, Melody earns a bit more, a gross salary of £45,240. How much income tax are they going to pay? So same personal allowance, same rate table, bigger green box for this person. Melody gets more money. So the first tub has 12,570 that can go into it. That's no problem. How much is left? So we've still got 32,670. So the basic rate tub can hold 37,700, and you can see that the 32,670 is not going to fill this up. There's going to be some space, so easy enough. 20% of that, 20% of 32,670 happens to be £6,534. Melody pays a bit more income tax, she earns more money. On to a harder example. Okay, well, you can probably guess what's going to happen here. Dom earns a gross salary of £65,680 per year. How much income tax do they pay? Bigger rectangle, more money. Now, I've simplified my tubs here a little bit. They don't really need to be different sizes. It's just a model to help you. I've got my personal allowance one of 12,570, got my basic rate tax one there at 37,700. So let's start splitting it up. They've obviously got enough that they're going to fill that personal allowance tub up with £53,110 left over. Now, you'll notice that that is going to fill up this box as well. So this tub, 37,700. They've got completely full up, and they've still got some money left. Dom earns a lot of money, 15,410 left over. So I'm going to need a third tub, the higher rate tub, and this is 40%. I've put lots there. That's sort of true, but it would mean going into the additional rate. But to keep things simple, you're probably not going to have to worry about that. If it's under £100,000, and you can just assume that that's got plenty of space in it. So the 15,410. Now, people do sometimes get this wrong. I don't think you will. If you use these tubs like this, pretty much guaranteed to be okay, I think. So it is 20% of the stuff in the basic tub, 20% of 37,700, and also 40% of just this bit. Sometimes people have a misconception that if you get yourself into this higher tax bracket, then you have to pay 40% on everything, and it just isn't how it works. People that think like that probably didn't do core maths. They're just wrong. It doesn't do that. You only pay 40% on the bit that spills into, as I'm phrasing it, as into the higher rate income tax tub, 40% of that. So 7,540, 6,164, added together to give you your total income tax for Dom, £13,704. Right, if you've made it this far, I'm going to guess that you do like what you're seeing. So as soon as you like it, why not just click that little like button before we go on. Section 6 is about national insurance. What is national insurance? Well, national insurance contributions are a different type of tax on your earnings. It's paid by employers and employees. So the employee, that's you, you're going to be paying some of this, but also your employers contribute as well. It helps build your entitlement to things like state benefits, so the pension for when you retire and maternity allowance if you need that. Similar to income tax, national insurance is typically collected on a PAYE system, so pay as you earn. It's taken out of your cash before you even get it, so it'll be deducted at source is a phrase some people like to say for that, and then what's left over, your net, gets put into your bank account. So you don't have to actually calculate it, but if you watch this video, you'll be able to check your pay slips and see if they've done it correctly. How is it different to national insurance, you might be wondering? So the table of rates for national insurance, it is different. So this is what I'm expecting it to be for the 2024 exams. I'm going to show you a table for what it was in September 2023. It actually has changed since then. The government have changed what they want the rates to be. But the last time that happened, the core maths exams were based on the rates that they were in September. So I'm going to work with those. And this is what it looks like. You can probably see it's a bit more detailed. There's a 0% bracket and then 12% and 2%. You've also got two sort of tables side by side here. You've got the monthly income, minimum, maximum monthly incomes for each of the brackets, and the yearly income, minimum and monthly as well. So it's kind of two tables side by side. A lot of the time I'm going to use the yearly one. I'd only really use the monthly one if I was forced into it. There has been a year where we got given the weekly ones as well, and you can use those if they suit the question you're doing, but a lot of the time it's easier to think annually. One thing that's really worth bearing in mind is that personal allowance that we were talking about, it's not actually applicable to the national insurance. You'll see in a minute that it kind of feels like it is, but it's technically different. You do not pay national insurance. The 0% bracket goes up to 12,570, which is conveniently the same value to make it easier to calculate. It's not technically a personal allowance, but you are not paying any national insurance on the first 12,570. Again, most of the time we don't worry about that because we're not going to have any different personal allowances to think about. But if, for whatever reason, the question you're looking at does have a lower personal allowance for some reason, that doesn't affect what you're doing in national insurance. That will only affect your income tax. So again, okay, 12% and 2%, all right, but how much are we actually going to have to pay? Time for some simple examples. Alex earns a gross salary of £10,300 per year. How much national insurance do they pay? Here's the yearly part of that table. Well, it's under the 12,570, so they're paying 0% on this. They're just going to pay nothing. They don't go past the maximum amount where you have to pay 0%. So nothing at all. Again, super easy example. Probably not what you're looking for. Let's go for a slightly more complicated one. Tom earns a gross salary of £28,780 per year. How much income tax do they pay? All right, well, I'm going to use orange here. Income tax and national insurance are different things. You really should get that into your head. I used green for the income tax. I'm going to use orange for national insurance. There's nothing special about those colors. I just want you to get in your head that they are different things. Okay, so there's that table. I can't use my income tax tubs, that will confuse you, so I'm going to use my national insurance cylinders. So the national insurance cylinders can be filled up. The first one is the 0% one that's got 12,570 capacity. Tom's obviously got more than that, so Tom's going to fill that one up, and we'll have a bit left over, 16,210, quite a lot left over. Enough that they spill into the 12% bracket. So the 12% bracket's a little bit bigger. Now, that 37,700 there comes from doing the maximum amount that you can get 12% for, 50,270, minus the maximum for 0%, 12,570. If you subtract those, you get 37,700. If you've got a reasonable memory, you'll know that just a few minutes ago we were talking about income tax, and the middle tub also was 37,700. That is super convenient, super nice. Does muddy the waters a little bit as to me saying these are different things. They are, but the numbers are really nice this year. So 12,570 for the first cylinder, 37,700 for the second cylinder. It is there in the table. It's a bit less obvious. If you do enough of these questions, you'll just remember these anyway. 16,210 does not fill that up. So it's just 12% of the 16,210. Do 0.12 times the number, you get your answer, £1,945, 20 pence. There we go. Cat earns a gross salary of 48,380 per year. How much income tax do they pay? Okay, so a bigger orange box, same table. First cylinder still 12,570. National insurance cylinder filled up, completely filled up. Lots left over, 33,810. I've got that by doing the gross salary, 48,380 minus 12,570. You probably figured that out, but just in case. So the second cylinder, the 12% cylinder, 37,700. Okay, well, 33,810, closer to filling it up, but doesn't actually fill it up. So we don't need to worry about a third cylinder. Again, 12% of whatever is in that tub there. That's not a tub, that's a cylinder. Whatever is in that cylinder there, 33,810, £4,057, 20 pence. Job done. I'm going to imagine that in this harder example, you can predict that we're going to have an imaginary person, Charlie this time, earning a lot of money. Correct. 98,750. Massive whacking bar for them. Get that table going. First cylinder, 12,570. They're obviously filling that up. We've got quite a lot left over. 86,000. You can tell they're going to fill up this cylinder too. So they're going to go well past this. 37,700. They've got loads left. How much? Well, 48,485. I'm just subtracting as we go. So I need a bigger cylinder for the last section, the 2% bit. I've put infinite. I suspect there's some laws that means it's probably not technically infinite. But for the sake of what we're doing, any extra money that goes past this, the first two cylinders is in that 2% bracket. And there we go. I should move all that up out of the way a minute. Give myself some space to do the workings. So 12% of this one, 2% of this one. Be really careful. That's 0.02. And again, you remember in income tax, I suggested using 0.20 just to really help cement 20% and 2% of different things. So 0.02 times it, add those together. Charlie is paying just over 5,000. Right. Tax and national insurance combined together in one question. Here we go. Dave has a gross annual salary of £67,400. He pays income tax and national insurance. His personal allowance is £12,570. Dave is saving up so he can buy a new computer and will save 1/5 of his monthly take-home pay. How much will he have saved in 3 months? Okay, let's break this down a little bit. So the gross annual salary, that just means this is how much Dave gets paid, supposedly, before any deductions. So income tax and national insurance are deductions taken off of your gross salary. Personal allowance of 12,570. What we were expecting, just put in there for clarity. Dave's saving up, new computer will save 1/5 of his monthly take-home pay. So we're going to need to work out take-home pay, and we want to do that monthly eventually. And then once we know that, we can just see how much 3 months of that will be. Okay, so there's quite a lot going on. Yeah, a little bit smaller. It is really easy to just have numbers all over your page here and making it incredibly difficult for the examiner to follow what you're thinking, but also really hard for you to think clearly through what you were doing, especially if you make a mistake and you want to go back and check something. So I'm going to recommend to you that you split your page up. You want to put a line down the middle, and you're going to do income tax over here, and you're going to do national insurance over there, and then leave yourself some space at the bottom where you can figure out the net pay, or answer the actual question once you've done those two bits. Promise you this helps a lot. It's a lot easier for everybody concerned. So one at a time, let's do income tax first. I'm going to do it a bit more like how I would actually write this out now. So I would write the 67,400. I would draw my tubs going. You'll notice that I haven't worried too much about the sizes here. So these are my income tax tubs, 12,570, 37,700, and a big one. And then 20% for the middle tub, 40% for the higher tub. Here we go. So there's obviously enough to fill up that first one. I want to do 67,400 minus 12,570 and see how much is left over. That is apparently 54,830. We're obviously using a calculator for all this. I'm going to cross that out now. I've dealt with that bit. I've now got 54,830 left. Does that fill up the middle tub? Well, yeah, obviously it does. It's bigger, so I can get 37,700 into that middle tub. How much is left? If you subtract it from 54,830, you get 17,130. Okay, so cross that one out. So now that 17,130 can just go into that tub, and there'll be 40% of that. So each calculation one at a time. I'm going to do 20%. I keep that zero in. 7,540. That number will come up a lot. Whenever anybody goes into the higher bracket, then their middle bit, the 20% bit, will come out as that. And the higher one, 0.40 times 17,130 in this case. Adding those together to give me a total income tax. I recommend putting a box around that. You're going to want to be able to find it for later on. Essentially starting again now with national insurance. Such a good point. You start again. You do not carry on from where you got to with the income tax. Income tax is put to one side, forget about it. You've got a box around that answer. We'll deal with that later. Go back to 67,400 and start all over again. You're going to get your cylinders. Again, I squished them a bit so they fit in better. Still the same numbers, 12,570, 37,700, but the percentages are different. 12% for the middle one, 2% for the last one. Okay, obviously 12,570 is full up. That leaves 54,830. And if you're remotely awake, you will notice that these numbers are the same because the brackets for each of the tubs and the cylinders happen to be the same numbers this year, which makes it really nice. So you can pretty much just copy these things across. You can redo the calculations, I recommend, because that way you can check if you're getting different answers here that something went wrong over in the national insurance one, so you can go back and check. But same numbers, 12% of the middle bit, 2%, 0.02 of the last part. Those two together give me £4,866, 60 pence in national insurance. Again, put a box around that. National insurance should be smaller than the income tax, just because it's 12% and 2% rather than 20% and 40%. Just a thing to have a quick mental check on. 4,800 is less than 14,000, so we're fine. Okay, into working out an annual take-home pay. So take-home pay and net pay, same thing. Net is the gross minus your deductions. So the annual gross, take off the income tax, take off the national insurance. Write some words out. Do not just start putting numbers down and hope that the examiner is going to be able to follow what you're doing. I'm fully aware that they probably will be able to follow, but why are you making things difficult for people? A couple of words just really help make it clear for everybody concerned. It really helps the examiner, but also you just articulating what you're doing. So Dave gets 67,400 is his annual gross, the 14,392, which I can easily find because I put a box around it earlier, and also the £4,866.60. If you take all of those things off, Dave's annual take-home pay is £48,141.40. Most salaries and jobs will pay that monthly, so we're thinking about the monthly take-home pay, which is just that number divided by 12. In this case, that's £4,011.78. There was a little bit of rounding there. I think I rounded down for that one. And then monthly savings. So this is 5%, not 5%, sorry, 1/5 of the monthly savings. It says that in the question. So it's 1/5 of his monthly take-home pay. So £4,011.78 divided by 5. 802.36. I think I've rounded down again there. If you round it up, that would probably be okay too. In fact, that would be okay. So the monthly savings are £802.36 a month. Final bit was how much will he have saved in 3 months? That's going to be that times 3. So Dave is saving £2,407, which should be enough to get himself a nice computer in 3 months' time. Right, that was an awful lot to take in. How about you just watch the whole thing again over? That will help my ratings, help my views. You might notice that I'm subtly going to ask you to like, share, comment, subscribe, all the usual things that you've seen many people ask you to do on videos. You might like to practice some questions. If you go to coremaster.co.uk, there is a section on there that will generate infinite questions for you. You can click on it and it'll give you a new person with a new amount of money, and you can calculate your answers, and then you can check it on there. It will tell you whether your answer is correct or not. Really does help me if you like and subscribe. Maybe you've got some things that you'd like some extra help with, or there's some topics you'd like covered. That would be a great thing to share in the comments. And why not share this with your core maths friends? If you're a student, you can show it to a teacher. If you are a teacher, you should be sharing it with your students. Whichever way around you are, you definitely want to check out the coremaths.co.uk for more resources. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.